Dune 2 comes out in theaters here in a few weeks, and the first movie just was released in IMAX. I got to catch it. This is actually the third time I've seen the movie, and the third time was clearly the charm. When I first watched this movie a few years ago, I remember really enjoying it. I saw the technical mastery behind it, although I was a little bit underwhelmed with some of the characters and the story. But now looking back on this and watching it again in IMAX this time for the first time, it was not only a technical masterpiece, but I realized a lot of character details and a lot of story details that really helped me remember this film more fondly than I did when it first released. One of the best things about this movie is how well it builds the world that these characters live in. It's high fantasy, it's sci fi, and it's not your typical Star Wars type. It's like Star Wars, but even crazier in a lot of ways. You have the similarities, like the big empire that's evil, that is only out for its own interests and, seemingly oppresses, the people that aren't as powerful. But Dune also makes its unique stamp and has a very intriguing concepts to it. For one, like spice and how it affects space travel, but also as a hallucinogen. That's a unique thing. Also, how the entire universe is basically a bunch of different powerful houses playing against each other. So it kind of had that Game of Thrones vibe to it, but obviously Dune, the book, was written way before Game of Thrones, so I guess it's more of a it's more of a Dune thing. Also, just the way that a lot of the equipment and the machinery and a lot of the spacecraft and the costumes and the sets, it all feels wholly unique, and it's not super derivative. Like, you can tell it's inspired by other things visually, but it's definitely one of these things where it's like, this feels like a lived in world of sci-fi, but it's not like so advanced to the point where it's like all conceptual. It does still feel really grounded to reality, which is kind of crazy. Also, this movie looks gorgeous. Everything from like visual effects to cinematography are really just immaculate. One thing that stood out to me in particular was the use of lighting. It really brought a lot of these scenes to life. A lot of these shots were just really big. You could see large amounts of, content within the frames. There's a couple really iconic shots of like overhead, really wide shots with, you could see like a ship coming up from underneath the water. Really beautiful looking. There's also a ship shadow flying over some people underneath, which not only looks great but also enhances the storytelling with its use of like metaphor. Yeah, cinematography here by Greg Fraser, one of the best cinematographers out there. Also did work on the Batman, which also I think was some of the best cinematography I've ever seen in that movie. And yeah, really brings it here. Immaculate stuff. The score by Hans Zimmer, it feels like a Hans Zimmer score. It's big, it's grand, it's epic, and it also drives a lot of the movie. I think it adds so much to the emotional crux of this movie because the characters themselves are written in a way where they're they're really focused on completing the mission. A lot of times they're not given the space to express emotion, so a lot of the emotion comes with the technical elements of the movie, and I think the score is probably the primary driver of that. The visual effects, I know I mentioned them earlier, there's really not much to say other than they're really good. Other than maybe like the Avatar movies, like this is the best visual effects I've ever seen in a film. Like I said earlier in this video, the biggest criticism I had of Dune when I first watched it was mostly the characters. Not a lot of them seem to have a whole lot of emotion or personality. There's only really one character, Jason Momoa's character, that kind of had that screen presence of, this guy's likable, he's heroic. Jason Momoa's probably best career performance, in my opinion. However, watching this for a third time, a couple years later, in IMAX, I took in more of the story beats. A lot of the dialogue is kind of hard to hear so like the third time I picked up more and more, I was able to follow the story to a greater degree, in a deeper degree. I noticed more details, and I can like really actually see a lot of detailed writing for these characters. Paul Atreides is actually a really compelling lead. Timothy Chalamet, I think he does a fine job. I wouldn't say this is like a career best performance, or it's not like I would say, oh, this guy needs like an award for this, but I still think it is a great performance, and I think his character is exceptionally written. He reminds me of like a young version of Aragorn. They have a lot of similarities. They both have a destiny that they don't really want to accept. However, they're capable. He's somebody who has done the physical training. He's not like completely worthless, even though he is small. He's a cut above a lot of his enemies. He's smart, he's resourceful, he's good with like combat. He shows signs of being a wise leader. However, he doesn't seem to desire it much. And then you can kind of see a shift in his character throughout the movie where he, you know, gets a little bit excited about a new opportunity for power. And some people might find that jarring, but I think it was interesting. I think it was something that if I were in his position, maybe I would like suddenly feel that. So I don't know. I think his character is more complex than I originally had noticed. I also really like the character of Paul Atreides' mother. I think that she is really underrated. I remember kind of like forgetting about her character, but she's actually is like really important. Not only like the lore that she kind of represents in the movie, the Gesserit, is that how you say it? Anyway, these women, mostly women, that have this some sort of like hypnotism or like mind control. They can speak words, and people have to like are compelled to follow them. It's almost like the command spell in Dungeons and Dragons. If y'all are familiar, that's probably the best way I can describe it. Anyway, there's a whole new layer of relationship that she has with her son. It's complicated. It's not just like a pure mother's love for a son. That's part of it, but also it's like it might have been motivated by greed. Paul feels a little bit used. There's an interesting dynamic there that I really hope gets expanded upon in the second movie. Also, Paul Atreides' dad, played by Oscar Isaac, I think is also a really good character. He's not in the film that much, really only the film's first act, but I think he is so important to this movie. He seems like a genuine, like, good-hearted man, a strong leader that I would want to follow. He's not a pushover, but he shows kindness and grace. And yeah, I think he's a good, like, anchor for Paul. And I don't want to spoil what happens, but at some point, Paul and his father get separated, and you can tell, like, Paul might be missing that guiding hand in his life when they do get separated. And I think that's going to make a big impact going forward on the story. I know Zendaya makes the news a lot. She's a fan favorite. She's really not in this movie that much, but she is going to play a big role in the coming movie, but there's really not much to say about her here. Overall, Dune feels like a movie that just doesn't come out every year. It's an epic in every sense of the word. One of the best like technical achievements you'll ever watch. It's really incredible. I definitely think it deserved to win the 6 Oscars that it did. And it may not be like the greatest screenplay ever written. Some of the lines are overly, prophetic or philosophical and kind of corny, whatever. But I mean that doesn't really matter that much, honestly. Like, this is just such an exceptionally directed, complete package of a movie, and you definitely need to go see this, especially with Dune 2 coming out. Also, at the end of this video, just want to quickly say that, like, doing this TikTok video stuff is actually pretty fun, and I also post these on YouTube if you'd rather, like, not scroll TikTok a bunch, and, like, YouTube is a more palatable format. So you can check that out too. I don't really edit videos. I just kind of upload these. But yeah, if that's what you'd rather do, that's great. For any of you that do watch, I get a couple hundred views on these things. Thanks for watching. If you ever want to just talk about movies and you stumble across one of my videos, comment. I love to talk about movies. I don't do it for views, really. It's just fun. I have all these movie thoughts in my brain that I just need to get out into the world, out of my brain. So, anyway, see you guys for the Dune 2 review in a couple weeks.